Hier ist die neue Folge der Ökonomie-Videos.
All right, today we're tackling a really big idea. I mean, a truly radical one that aims to completely rewire our entire financial system. It's called Vollgeld, which translates to sovereign money. And it kicks off with a simple question that has some, well, incredibly complex answers. It's a fascinating concept that could change pretty much everything. So let's get into it. So let me just start with this question. What if the money in your bank account, your checking account, was 100% safe? I mean, completely and totally safe, even if your bank went belly up tomorrow. No complicated bailouts, no waiting on deposit insurance, just safe. It's a pretty compelling thought, right? And it gets right to the heart of the anxiety a lot of us feel about the whole banking system. Now, to really get this, we first have to bust a huge myth about how banks work. You know, most of us think of banks as just middlemen. We deposit our money and they turn around and lend that exact same money to someone else, but that's not really how it works. In reality, commercial banks create brand new digital money, poof, out of thin air, every single time they issue a loan. That new money is basically an IOU. Now, this system is what fuels our economy, for sure, but it's also what makes it inherently fragile. And it's that fragility that Vollgeld is designed to fix. Okay, so if the system's broken, how do we fix it? Well, this is where Vollgeld comes in, and its promise is as simple as it is radical. The core idea here is honestly brilliantly simple. With Vollgeld or sovereign money, the power to create money gets stripped away from private banks and handed over exclusively to the central bank. So commercial banks, they just become simple financial go-betweens. They can only lend out money that they actually have on hand, money that customers have specifically deposited with them for investment. So what's the big sell? Well, the folks who support this massive change usually boil it down to three key promises. First and foremost, and this is the big one for most people, your money is finally secure. Your checking account wouldn't be holding commercial bank IOUs anymore. It would be holding official central bank money. You can think of it like digital cash. Your bank is just the company that provides the payment service, like your phone provider. So if that bank fails, your money is fine. It's totally untouched because it was never really the bank's money to begin with. The fear of a bank run on checking accounts, poof, gone. Second, the profit that comes from creating money, there's a fancy word for it, seigniorage, would go back to the public. You see, right now, when commercial banks create new money by issuing loans, they pocket the profit. Under Vollgeld, that profit would go straight to the government, and that money could then be used to, say, reduce public debt or pay for public projects. And third, the banking system would finally work the way most of us thought it did all along. Banks would have to actually compete for your savings to get the capital they need to make loans. It brings this sort of intuitive honesty and real market competition back into banking. It's a simple what you see is what you get kind of system. So a safer, more honest system where the profits go to the people sounds amazing, right? So that leads to the obvious, multi-trillion-dollar question. If it's so great, why don't we do it? Well, this is where this beautifully simple idea slams headfirst into some very complex and, frankly, very risky realities. The first massive roadblock is basically a political minefield. In a Vollgeld world, somebody has to decide exactly how much new money the economy needs every year. So who gets that incredible power, and how on earth do they decide? The problem is that as soon as you give that power to, say, a committee, you create an instant conflict of interest. You're always going to have one side pushing to create more money to fund their pet projects and juice the economy, and you'll have another side wanting to create less money to keep inflation in check. The result is just this endless political tug of war, which makes finding the right amount of money, well, pretty much impossible. Now, the tech answer to this is, hey, let's just let an algorithm decide. You could program a formula, maybe like the famous Taylor rule, to automatically adjust the money supply based on economic data. But here's the massive flaw in that plan. Formulas are rigid. They might work okay when times are stable, but they completely break down during a sudden shock, like a global pandemic or a huge financial crash. And that's exactly when you need a flexible human response the most. But let's just say a country somehow figured out that control problem. Well, then they'd face a whole new wave of unintended consequences, especially when it comes to the rest of the world. Think about how massive projects get funded. Building a new factory, a high-speed rail line, that stuff takes huge amounts of long-term investment. In a Vollgeld system, banks can only fund those projects if enough people are willing to lock up their money in long-term savings accounts. But what if not enough people do that? The real risk here is that you could actually starve the economy of the credit it needs for big society-changing investments. The very kind of credit that fueled things like the Industrial Revolution could just dry up. Progress could slow to a crawl. And by solving one problem, you could easily create others. If the regular banks can't provide enough credit, you can bet that unregulated shadow banks will pop up to fill that demand, creating a whole new area of financial risk. And get this, while you've solved bank runs on checking accounts, you could still have bank runs on savings accounts because that money is now tied up in those long-term, hard-to-sell projects. Oh, and by the way, since banks can't make money from creating loans anymore, the fees on your simple checking account would almost certainly have to go up. But maybe the single biggest hurdle, the argument that many economists see as the absolute deal breaker, is the issue of international trust. So here's the critical point. In a Vollgeld system, the central bank is literally creating money from nothing. When it makes a new digital dollar, there's no corresponding asset, no loan created on its balance sheet. To an international investor, that looks incredibly sketchy. Why would they trust a currency that isn't really backed by anything? The fear is they wouldn't. They'd sell that currency as fast as they possibly could. That would cause its value to absolutely plummet, leading to massive inflation on imported goods and eventually destroying the savings of the country's own citizens. So when you put all these pieces together, the political headaches, the economic risks, this massive trust deficit, a very, very different picture of Vollgeld starts to take shape. I mean, history gives us some pretty serious warnings. We've seen versions of state-controlled money creation fail spectacularly in socialist countries. More recently, Germany's own central bank ran the numbers and concluded that a 100% money system would probably have negative effects on the economy. The bottom line here is that no modern country has ever actually done this. The first one to try would be taking a giant, and I mean giant, leap into the dark.
And that brings us to this powerful quote from the economist Stefan Schulmeister. He says that in confusing, chaotic times, we all start looking for a magic bullet, a panacea. He calls Vollgeld a well-intentioned fiasco. It's an idea that sounds perfect on paper, but it completely ignores the messy, complicated, evolutionary reasons our current system works the way it does, flaws and all. It's this urge to just scrap everything and design a perfect world from scratch without respecting the systems that have grown over time.
So in the end, we're left with this really tough question. The whole Vollgeld debate forces us to look at a hard trade-off. Our current financial system, yeah, it's complex, it's risky, it's definitely flawed, but it has also managed to fuel centuries of incredible growth. Vollgeld offers this beautiful vision of perfect safety and simplicity, but is a flawed system that we know, one that sort of works better than a supposedly perfect one that might not work at all? That is the fundamental question at the heart of our financial world. Thanks for joining me.